Welcome to another episode on catalyzing radical systemic change. Today's topic is organizational design in an age of ecosystems. Why do I think that's of tantamount importance? Well, frankly, because when I was back in university, we learned organizational design from a very narrow perspective. So most of you that have done an MBA or that have studied economics will learn that it's all about maximizing, for example, the profits in your own entity. In as much as this may be true from whatever perspective, understanding platform design and multi-sided platforms and how they have greatly disrupted most of all classical economic structures and will continue to do so. It's just of a huge importance to understand platform design. So that's one thing. The other thing is the way multi-sided platforms are built. Let's just take Airbnb or Uber, just creates more externalities on behalf of society because they're basically cutting the middleman out. So one of the things that I want to take a deep dive today with my distinguished guest here, Luca Ruggeri, the co-founder of Boundaryless, and in his title it also says micro enterprise lead. What I want to deeper understand is how can we better understand platform design and use it as a force for good. I think that's enough for an intro. So Luca, we know each other for a couple of years. My first question today just to give the people an idea of why am I sitting in this room together is what sparked your interest in entrepreneurship and specifically in platform design?
Well, that's a very good starting question because of me. Of course, my story comes from a personal experience I had in the past. So I have a background as a telco engineer, and I spent the initial 10 years of my life working as a perfect employee. So very reliable, hard worker. So I was basically working for my company as one of the most junior employees, as if the company was mine. But then, so life events, a lot of things changes, and you also understand that stability and safety of income is not that granted even if you work for a large corporation, multinational. And so that's why I start maturing maybe a little later. So if I can get back with the memory of my experience, a little late. So this is something I would like to transfer to my friends and my son, my family. But my interest in entrepreneurship comes from the awareness I've taken around 2010, 11, that a lot of things change very fast and they are mostly unpredictable, even if I just recalling this, I'm an engineer, so I'm really very comfortable with rules and forecasting and Gantt and project management. But indeed, the reality is that you can't plan that much. Most of the listeners are very familiar probably with the concept of the black swan from Taleb. That's definitely true. So we can't plan. We need to do something else in order to feel more comfortable and safer and more secure in our planning. So I would say, long story short, my interest in entrepreneurship comes from my willingness to become more anti-fragile, building on top of Nassim Taleb's words. So trying to have something more active, more intentional in the things I do and I will do. So that's the starting point that I matured starting from 2011.
Then for everybody in the audience that never heard about Boundaryless and Platform Design Toolkit, I want to start with a quote from the homepage. It reads, "Boundaryless helps global customers with business strategy and organization design for the age of ecosystems. And then it says, we create open source frameworks for platform design and entrepreneurial organization development. We support a global community of organizations, institutions, and individuals through workshops, training, and consulting services. So before I hand over to you, since I did the training, which really helped me a lot better understand actually these, let's say, unpredictable black swan events, and also really how deeply actually platform design really disrupts the way traditionally enterprises have been thought of and organized. Please tell me about the different life phases of Boundaryless. So from the inception, the early years, the hustle grind, but please also some of the success stories as well as the failures.
Yeah, it's well, I would say now it's 10 years of evolutionary story of Boundaryless. So I would say that at the beginning, it was early years around 2013, Boundaryless was pretty different from what is today. So at the time, my business partner, Simone, was the initial creator and visionary, behind the extension of the so famous business model canvas from Alex Osterwalder. He was really much into sharing economy, collaborative economy, and he perceived in 2013 that business model canvas was not enough for addressing the specific problems of collaborative design, ecosystemic design of business models. Because, well, I think business model canvas is great. It was born probably in the 90s, if I'm not wrong, or in the early 2000s, to address specific problems connected to creation of solutions. But ecosystemic thinking does something different. No? We used to say, with also joking a little with our potential clients, customers, and interested people, that basically, if you want to design a platform, you need to step back. So you don't want to provide solutions anymore. You want to provide building blocks for others to build solutions on top of the building blocks that you're providing them. So it's a slight change in perspective, but it has a huge impact in the way that you design things, because you don't want to design solutions for a specific reason, that you can know all the solutions needed, and you can know all the conditions, all the needs that are hidden, are unexpressed in the ecosystem. Only the ecosystem can do that, can know that. So you better step back and enable them. So that's why in 2013, starting from this perspective, we created some extensions of the business model canvas addressing the basic concept of platform thinking. So you need to identify a group, very large group of producers of value. And value is the key word here. We're gonna expand it that much today together, because value is a strange term, is a strange word. Now, for 99% of people, value equals profit, but is not why we are here today, and is not what I believe. But indeed, once that you have the producers of value, then you need to connect them with the consumers of value. And this is the 90% of the essence of platform thinking. So what happened is we start creating new canvases, because we're also a big fan of service design, of collaborative design. We don't really want to act as the standard consulting companies that are basically doing the homework and doing the math at the office desk, and then present to you after 2 or 3 months the perfect plan for catching that value that was there. We don't want to do like that, because we are very well aware that we are not all the domain experts of all the domains possible, and we really want to give instruments and tools to the final users of these solutions, this value, the creators and the consumers of this value, so that they can be, they can take this mindset. This is also a very important concept. So one of the, let's say, the most accessible entry points of our activity as Boundaryless is called on purpose mind shift sessions, because we want to instill this change in the perspective, change in the mindset of all the users. But then, starting from that very starting moment, we had at the time one canvas. We can measure maybe the evolution of Boundaryless counting the number of canvases that are covering different parts. And to date, we have 17 canvases for the business model innovation part, but also, and this is an important milestone in our development and a success story, we start working with a lot of different types of customers in the years. So from 2013 to 2018, we were working as basically freelancers with our personal VAT IDs. And then in 2018, we founded the company, the legal entity. And a little later in 2019, we've been contacted by a very important company in the world. This company is called Hire. Probably a lot of listeners would know it. And Haier is a famous Chinese company that is producing white goods and appliances. So it's in the heavy industries, it's in the metal mechanics industry. But indeed, they had a very brilliant organizational model called Rendan Hei, with a very fascinating story. So the CEO of Haier took 34 years to evolve from a standard hierarchical military structure company into something totally different. And in 2019, basically listening the experience from Haier, and we have been invited into the largest event at Haier, and the Haier Model Institute repeats every year. It's about disseminating, explaining to all the interesting entities how this model works. We have been asked by Haier to create a methodology around that, the company structure, because they wanted to scale the capability to teach this model to other companies and guide other companies to adopt it. And this is where and when we develop the other branch of what we do at Boundaryless, that is called a TRIO. And TRIO stands for Entrepreneurial Enabling Ecosystem Organizations. It's a fundamental milestone because we definitely understood by then that since companies doesn't exist in the vacuum, and the most important thing is that they are continuously exchanging value. Companies is also probably the wrong word, because we can replace it with organizations of any kind, independently whether they are for profit or non-for-profit, they are single individuals, they are cooperatives, there's a group of people with a common purpose. All of them, they will like to play the game of platforms. They can really unleash the full potential only if they also to a certain sense, they are dog fooding themselves, and they are turning themselves, their structure, into a platform company, platform organization structure. And this is what the TRIO does. Well, success stories, just to also give you some ideas. We've been lucky. I truly believe that, because we had the possibility to get in touch with so many different contexts. So we had been working with some Fortune 500 companies, from ranging from healthcare to mobility and electronics, but also we have been working with the UNDP, so the United Nations Development Program. We have been working with some non-profit organizations, great organization helping with the disability, helping people with disability, but also working at the impact investment in developing countries. So that's, I mean, that was a very great experience, because it proved to ourselves that on one hand, platform thinking, platform principles are universal, and they are basically agnostic. So you can turn literally everything into a platform, and you should do that. So there is James Carrier, for those of you that know about network effects and maybe are a little into the venture business, venture investments. James Carrier is the founder of Network Effects, and Network Effects Guild is the blog. They're investing on network effects based organization and models and activities and platform, definitely. And he said that basically you can't escape the platform revolution. So either you will master your platform strategy, or you'll be subjected to someone else's platform strategy, because platform business models are so efficient today that they can value from 4 to 8 times more than any other business model they've invented. But it's not only about the profitability, it's not only about the multiplier of investment, it's also about the scale of impact. So platform can scale horizontally, they just not have to scale vertically. And if you really want to have an impact and change the world, and this is probably the main topic for today's conversation, there's no way that you ignore platforms.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful bifurcation point now coming in the conversation. So I wonder, just to summarize for the listeners, what's the main takeaway? My main takeaway before doing the training, certainly after the training, is if you don't educate yourself on platform design, or now AI, not the topic of this podcast, you simply lose, in a classical economic sense, competitive advantage. Because if you don't apply the lessons of platform design to your own cause, again, from for-profit to non-profit to hybrid business models, then somebody else will basically platformize you. So that's one takeaway. The second takeaway, which, truth be told, I did not have that clear before doing the training, is the toolkit per se. I'm not saying only that of Boundaryless, but we're now speaking with one of the co-founders of Boundaryless. So the platform design toolkit per se is like content agnostic. And this really means that also classical nonprofit organizations from whatever the range of Greenpeace or Terre des Hommes or United Nations Development Department need to understand and educate themselves of, let's say, the mechanics or the code or whatever you want to call it, this invisible infrastructure that underlies what we see on the outside. So, for example, the organization working. Nevertheless, can you nuance for the audience, first of all, maybe the main takeaways and the lessons you had, but also learning from success and failure with your customers? What are the differences for applying platform design for-profit enterprises and non-profit enterprises? That's one question. And the other question is there any difference in how big an organization is? Because hire is huge, but you're the micro enterprise lead. So that's like kind of the two next questions that I think should help the audience take a deeper dive.
Okay, well, good questions. Good questions. So let's address first the profit versus non-profit thing. So I really believe that platform design principles are universal. And these principles are about identify who can produce value, who can consume value, how many degrees of personalizations and customization of the offering the producers can offer to the counterparts, and how we can help consumers to make it explicit, to explain clearly what is the tailor-made custom solution they're looking for today. And the reason why platform business models are so efficient is that they are today accomplishing to this. So they are perfect ways to do the matching, the matchmaking, the connection between producers and consumers. And they are exponentially leveraging the world famous concept of the long tail that was born probably in 2006 from Christian Andersen. So a lot of traditional models are designed to address let's say the bigger fishes and the bigger whales in the ocean. So they are addressing the top targets, the top clients, the top customers. But we are totally forgetting all the smaller and smaller players that are there to be enabled and to be put in condition to look at something, and in my definition, this something is the platform that is amplifying their value, that is turning what they're trying and they're striving to do, because today is friction, is not efficient, is probably not sustainable, into something that indeed is sustainable, is proficient, is effective, and they can do that. So under this exception, there's no big difference between profit and non-profit. In my experience, the main friction point is that while in the for-profit world is very easy to understand who is providing value and who is not. And of course, I have a spoiler. It's easier, but it's not that easy, because, for instance, if I make you an example, and I'm going to ask you, if in a traditional startup ecosystem composed by startups and investors, who is providing value to whom and who is consuming value, this is a typical counterintuitive example, because to me, who is providing value is the startup, and who is consuming value is the investor that is using platform strategies to find the right startup, the right investment opportunities where to invest. So in my perspective, a platform strategy puts investors in the role of consumers of value. While traditionally speaking, since the investor is paying, normally they are associated with producers of value. Then in the non-for-profit, something changes, because non-for-profit normally doesn't put, and this is great, by the way, doesn't put profit in the first place. So the profitability is not the only indicator of success of a strategy. Probably impact and changing the quality of life of a group of people is the key driver there. So it's hard to identify who is producing and who is consuming value, because the complexity of the reality says that all the exchanges between entities are basically mutually exchanges where someone is producing, someone is consuming, and vice versa. But it's very important for reducing this complexity and being capable of designing something that is specific enough to help us shaping the value propositions also for the nonprofit actors and roles. It's very important that we narrow down the single atomic transactions between entities, and we are able to isolate when an entity is producing value and when the other entity is consuming, and vice versa. The normal example is, if I am a volunteer and I'm providing my spare time to do something, so am I a producer? Am I a consumer of value? Probably I'm producing value because I'm giving my free time to do some labor, some activities, and to satisfy some needs. But then I'm doing this because I'm learning something, because I'm feeling better with myself. I have the feeling of giving back. So of course, all the exchanges are mutually producing and consuming value, but we need to isolate this, because we need to provide tools, services, channels for guiding this interaction and making them desirable, not only sustainable, so that we can incentivize more and more entities to do this. We can also give the possibility to the smallest entities that now are prevented to do activities, to do exchanges of value, because this value exchange has a cost that is too high. And when I'm mentioning cost, I'm not only thinking about the financial cost of such a transaction. Most of times is about, I don't really know how to do that, and this is blocking me. I would, but I don't know from where I can start. And so there's a lot of potential that is hidden. So this is something that we really want to do. Second elements, but this is of course is an intrinsic problem of our methodology, is that platform thinking and platform business model comes from financial and economics theories. So the terminology used comes from the business world. So we are putting a lot of attention and a lot of efforts into giving the proper definition of this terminology. So for instance, I said it already. When I mention value for me is a general concept. Value could be spare time, could be something that I would like to do for my personal pleasure, or it could be something that I've been paid for, but it's still value. So value doesn't equal profit, doesn't equal money, but this is, of course, every time that I mention value and efficiency, all people think about money and profitability. So there is a language barrier also. But indeed, we have very good examples also in applying the PDT to nonprofit, and it works.
Before we go over to the second question of micro enterprises and big enterprises, let's stay with the nuancing or differentiating in between nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations. And I would like you to sketch a couple, at least two examples. So one from the for-profit world where you were involved, and where it really disrupted to a great degree the enterprise, the organizational structure. So almost like, what is your Uber and Airbnb effect? And the other one, which I'm specifically also interested, and I reckon also the audience, is where was a big disruption point happening in the nonprofit environment?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me start from the final one, from the nonprofit example. So I'm not sure I can disclose the name, but I can describe the context. So this reality was a great reality in the US. There were a nonprofit association wanted to give universal access to healthcare to people suffering from inequalities. And in that specific case, they were trying to give top-in-class healthcare services to Black women let's say, connected to the maternity and breastfeeding. They were living in the depressed areas in the US. So there are some cities in the not on the coasts where maybe the economical situation is not that great, and there are a lot of inequalities happening, especially when coming to gender inequalities, and especially also to racial inequalities, and I mean a lot of potential problems. And they were doing great. So because that association was already working in that field, but they had a problem of, they have basically two problems. First of all, they had to find a way to help the local contributors, let me call them local entrepreneurs as well. They would like to start local projects to assist women, to assist persons, and give them healthcare services, but also social services and psychological stuff. So everything needed in those areas. They didn't know how to qualify their capacities. They didn't know how to qualify the effort needed. They didn't know how to present their projects to the investment board. So there were plenty of money to be distributed, but they didn't know how to select the different projects because all of them were coming from in a non-comparable way. And also they didn't know how to address the specific needs of different cities, different entrepreneurs because I mean, some of them, they would just need money and they had already the pipeline in place to do everything. Some of them, they were maybe only people with goodwill, but they didn't know from where to start, basically. The second problem they had is, even if there were plenty of donations and philanthropic money, indeed they can't count on a continuous pipeline of cash flow. So they had bursts of money, of course, I mean, coming from the donation, and donation systems and charity system is pretty different in the US from Europe. So basically they rely a lot on charity investments. And so they wanted methodologies and they wanted processes in order to continuously attract new investors, new philanthropists, and to have this pipeline. And applying platform thinking to those different problems, then we help them to shape methodologies, processes, document templates, and also events, so local events where they can explain platform thinking, educate people, and also help local entrepreneurs, local contributors to qualify their projects. Like in a, it could be in a startup academy. So if you want to have a parallel, but of course apply to the nonprofit world, also interviewing real people, helping them addressing the real problems. It was something very useful. Then the second question you asked, so something for the for-profit world and the haha moment or the transformational moment. Well, let me say that it depends mostly also on the scale. So we had haha moments with very large companies, very large organizations, but the activity we did there was a little different because you can apply platform thinking at different maturity stages of your idea. Of course, if you're starting from scratch, probably for me that I have an education as a startup is one of the best conditions because you have a blank sheet in front of you, you're starting from scratch and you can start addressing all the problems from the right perspective. But then, of course, the problems there are not about the methodology, are not about the designing part, but they are about validation, go-to-market, fundraising. And so you have a lot of problems as well. Nothing is easy. There is no free meal. The other perspective is if you're a very large company with many projects, some of them are already in an advanced maturity stage, then you can also apply the platform thinking. You can apply it to, for instance, do what we call the gap delta analysis. So you try to design the optimal situation, then you assess the maturity stage where you are with your idea, and then you make the differences and you understand if you need to change something. And for instance, this happened, it will sound like a joke, no? Because once that you have that epiphanic moment, then you feel also a little dumb, no? Because how couldn't you think about that earlier? But I mean, of course, we all know how business goes. And so you are basically in a washing machine and you try to do everything that you can do to improve the situation. But then sometimes you miss the very important detail that change everything. Let me try to give this example without disclosing proprietary and sensitive information. So I was working with a very big company in the civil aviation sector, and they were providing maintenance services to every company, to every airline that had some problems with the airplanes, and the airplane can't take off. So it's a very sensitive condition because it's very expensive for the airlines. So in that case, what happened was that everything was working from the fault detection onwards. So fault reported, mechanics on the plane, assessment done, checks, and then spare part and repairing and so on. But the very big problem was that all airports are managing the reporting chain of a potential issue in a different way. And believe it or not, 99% of airports are just basing this reporting chain with a word of mouth, or the pilot just saying something to the personnel on the ground and say, well, that's a LED blinking there. Probably it could be a fault, it could be a problem. No one knows what to do. No one knows how to quickly intervene. So they need to report until someone maybe knows what to do and sends the technician on the plane and so on. And this condition can last for hours, literally. So analyzing these processes, doing interviews and visualizing these blocking points, we use several techniques to address all these business process modeling problems. So we understood that a big missing point was a clear channel to report problems, and hopefully maybe a digital channel so that it could be easily accessible and fast accessible by everyone. So we did that, and basically we improve the performances of the repairing, so that it's measuring in terms of hours not spent on the ground. We improved that by 80%. So they were super happy because for this company, this is a very strong competitive advantage. I told you, it sounds like a joke, no? But this is what happens 99% of time. So that's a good condition. With large companies, instead, the aha moment is a little less, let's say, evident. But a lot of companies, especially the multinational branches, are not aware of what the other branches are doing. So in our activity, what we're trying to explicitate all the processes and how the value flows from the producers of value to the consumers of value. And we often find that they would really benefit from having a portfolio of so shaping a portfolio map of all the different contributions they can give in terms of value. And by the way, just to close this quick answer, this is the same problem that is also missing to a lot of non-for-profit activities, because we have a problem. This is my personal perspective. We have a problem with non-for-profit. First of all, non-for-profit activities are full of people of goodwill. A lot of people doesn't like to deal with money. I can understand why. So I'm not criticizing that, and I'm not judging why. But we have a problem when dealing with money, because we associate money with capitalism and with the evilish part of the exploitation and extractive business models. But indeed, local activities are hardly ever sustainable if you don't do anything for the money. And the key could be here, for instance, to connect different local activities, non-for-profit local activities, connect them in a global way, where maybe they can exchange education, they can exchange knowledge, they can even exchange funding or strategies, and they are all connected globally. And this is basically a portfolio landscaping of the different possibilities they have in the non-for-profit. So independently whether you are doing something for in the healthcare or for improving the social life and the quality of life in cities and in society, or maybe if you are working with regenerative agriculture or local agriculture, you can be connected to each other, and you can create a changing movement. That's something that we can do with platforms.
Yeah, so let's segue into, let's say, the overall topic of regenerative business models. So we basically learned educate yourself overall on platform design. If not, you just lose an important feature to design a successful organization, be it from for-profit to non-profit to hybrid business models. Why especially, and maybe you can also start with a couple of examples, why especially for regenerative business models, it is so important to use, let's say, an organizational design that's like open and that designs the organization embedded in an ecosystem. And maybe just from my side, so when the listeners ask, well, what is a regenerative business model? For me, a regenerative business model is everything that's not using ESG, just fig leafing bad behavior. It's everything that creates at least a net positive impact. So not just like, let's say, neutrality, like carbon neutrality or zero impact, but literally through a business model, for purpose business model, regenerates the health of soil or has a societal impact or improves the livelihood of women producing textiles in Bangladesh or whatever. So I would like to use a regenerative business model in the broadest sense of the matter, so that we don't need to lose ourselves in the nitty-gritty of, is this a regenerative business model or not? Because I think we're in an age of basically an exploding segment of regenerative business models. And yes, there are some examples. There are not a lot of examples from, let's say, big enterprises. Usually it's always the same couple of names that will be dropped. But anyhow, letting you take over, why does organizational design from an ecosystemic perspective make all the difference, especially for regenerative business models?
Yeah, I tend to agree with your definition of regenerative. So the definition of what is regenerative or not is still problematic to me, because it's not a shared definition. And this is also a field where platform thinking can be applied, because the platform thinking principle says that as a group of entities, as a group of roles that are providing value and consuming value, the first thing that you want to do is to create this governance infrastructure. So platforms are, before being technologies and before being something in the digital domain, platforms are governance structures, are models that are helping people understanding what they can do, how they can do it, and why through the platform channels and services they can do it in a better way. And part of this definition of the governance strategy starts from the mutual agreement and mutual definition of what are the key drivers for success or for instance, value. So I totally agree with you. Regenerative models shouldn't put profitability as the first driver of success. Of course, profitability is important because if you're profitable, that means that your activity can last longer and maybe you can reinvest in something. But then profitability should also be accompanied with a good methodology to redistribute this value. So not accruing value into a very few stakeholders, but use this marginality instead to do something else, to maybe scale across, scale horizontally to improve what you can do. But not only, there are several tentatives in the world to redefine profitability and introduce some indicator of quality of life, social quality. So in Europe, in Italy, we have something called BES, that stands for it's a KPI that measures the quality of life in the country. So it's not only the profitability, it's not only the gross profit. But I mean, it's not shared. So we need to find something else. I also agree with your nudging on the meaning of ESG. So ESG is not just a report, it's not just something that you need to accompany your balance with, but it's something that needs to be felt. So not only environmental, also social, for instance, is very important. So if you are regenerating because you're improving the quality of life of people and you are connecting them with the neighborhood, with the network of local activities, that's great. So it's not only about regenerative in the sense of environmentally regenerative or agriculturally regenerative. Then, of course, I mean, stepping down to the importance of the different pillars we have, of course, dealing with environment, dealing with sustainability, and not exploitation would be great. But if I can pick one of the most important features of what is, in my opinion, regenerative, I would stand for doing something that at the same time increases the diversity and the anti-fragility of what entities are capable of doing thanks to these regenerative business models, because we all know that, of course, I mean, this is something I started with, no? It's very hard to predict, it's very hard to forecast something. And also the pandemics now is a painful lesson learned for everyone. So we knew that this could be possibly happening, but no one really believed that there could be a real possibility, and no one knew that could strike us so heavily and so deeply. But then it happened. And luckily, maybe today, we are almost out of it. And a lot of people, myself included, says that probably we didn't learn the key lessons from the pandemic. So we are basically coming back to our business as usual. Maybe it's not true 100%, but we didn't do, we could manage it better, a little better. But this is evident. They are very fragile. And to me, regenerative, it would be the key for the future only if we can really improve the anti-fragility, so we can diversify, we can relocalize part of the economy, we can become a little more independent each other, so we can deglobalize a little the economy. Of course, we can get back to a non-globalized world. But I don't know if the audience is familiar with a famous study in the 60s done by the Club of Rome called Limits to Growth, sorry. And it's impressive because if you're not familiar with that, try to Google it. I will pass the link to you, and so you can share with the audience. Because in the 70s, a group of brilliant scientists did some what-if scenario simulations, and they clearly understood in the 70s, sorry if I'm repeating this so many times, in the early 70s, they understood that the world as we know it today was not sustainable already. And we shouldn't have used all the resources with the rate that we are used to do. And this is also goes together with the liability, the offsetting liabilities that you mentioned, Alistair. That would be fundamental. So there's no reason ever why we pay for a plastic bag 10 cents. A plastic bag should cost $50, no, 50 euros, because we need to take into account all the liabilities at the environmental level, loss of biodiversity. So all the problems that we now are connecting to pollution and the Anthropocene. And so they have been warning us, but every one of us ignored this. So now we need to play with the cards that we have. I'm very skeptical that we can get back to a, let's say, normal situation pre-Anthropocene, but indeed we have to play. So this is what we have to do also for psychological safety and for motivation. So we need to play. And the right way is probably to put us in condition to be a little less sensitive to the future disruption that we will come for sure. So we can't close our eyes and pretend that they are not coming and, okay, this is done. So in my life, I won't ever assist to any new pandemic or any new crisis. I'm from Italy. In the past month, we had a lot of problems with floods and water bombs and extreme climate conditions in the richest part of Italy, by the way. So the part that is more served by services, by infrastructures, is plenty of financial resources. So it can hit everyone at any moment, independently whether you are in the top 1% of the richest people in the world of if you are in a developing country. And we need to do something that is improving this anti-fragility. And sorry, maybe I'm speaking too much, but since platform thinking is born to help local entrepreneurs, local people, local group of people, I'm calling them entrepreneurs because to me, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is something about taking active control on your sphere of influence. So trying to change things for good, ideally. And this is probably the key. So try to put also the individual, the last individual, in condition to express the full potential she can express. That would be the right part.
I'm interested in that part of the conversation because in your title, it reads, obviously, co-founder Boundaryless, but then platform design micro enterprise lead. So before handing over to you, please tell me specifically what sparked your interest for micro enterprises, why, and then how your framework makes a difference specifically for micro enterprises. And please differentiate it from the fact that you're also working with very large organizations, because I know per se you're agnostic of the context, and we've spoken about basically applying it to for-profit and non-profit. So I want to really now, hand over to you and educate the audience on where they themselves as a micro enterprise can really greatly benefit from thinking like with open boundaries and using your framework.
Yes, that connects with my last sentence, because the only way that you can do in order to put even individuals in condition to be as much as autonomous, as much as independent as they can, and also put them in a strong condition of responsibility, is to exactly do this. So is to transform any type of organization into a platform organization. So microenterprise is a technical definition that comes from the Rendanei model I mentioned about higher. And it's about understanding that a lot of organizations today, and this is the same in the for-profit and in the non-profit world, every time that we have large organizations. So if you think about Emergency or WWF, so large organization also in the non-profit world, a lot of them are suffering for what is technically called tech and administrative debt. So since they have been grown that much, they have a strong and nested infrastructure, and this infrastructure is a cost. And what happens in the long run is that in order to justify the structure itself that you have created, You need to increase your business footprint, you need to increase your profitability, you need to grow in terms of revenues. Okay, and so as a result, but this is an intrinsic limitation. As a result, probably if I'm donating 10 euros to emergency, probably only 1 euro out of 10 goes to the final entities who need some help. The other 9 euros are covering the infrastructural costs. And of course, this is multiplied by probably 10 in the for-profit organizations. So, and you can have several problems if you are in that situation of a high technical and administrative debt in a company. First of all, you can't take all the opportunities that you see in the market, because you have to cherry pick only those opportunities that are profitable enough to justify the cost of your infrastructure. And second thing is that very few people are in a position of responsibility, because you're hiding yourself into the large infrastructure, hierarchical infrastructure. So there are a lot of scapegoating activities that you can do in order to not do things. So microenterprise thing comes from the perception that if you can really unbundle this organizational structure into something that is essential at the bone level, and so you isolate who is really producing value and who's really consuming value, and you shape your company as if it's a platform. So where you offer services to the producers of value to produce value more efficiently, and services to the consumers of value to access to the value the producers can produce in a very asset-light, nimble way, you can get very closer to the final needs, and then you can make a best use of the resources. So long story short, microenterprises means that you unbundle the company, the organizational structure, into small atomic units that are called microenterprises, that can be as small as 2 or 3 people. They can be also hundreds and thousands of people, of course, but they are profit and loss autonomous. So they have the only responsibility they have is to be profit and loss autonomous and of course profitable, and to clearly declare value propositions that are consumed by the counterparts. In this way, you can create dynamic, flexible organizations that are reassembling, rebundling according to the final need that in that specific time, moment in time, and purpose in time is needed. So if you are a for-profit organization and you are maybe suffering from a peak of requests, maybe you can bundle together more microenterprises that are producing goods, and you can satisfy the peak in the demand. Or maybe if now maybe you are in a market contraction, so you don't have so many deliveries to be done, maybe you can take the time to increase the educational level and the capabilities and skills of your other microenterprises, and so you can provide them maybe with educational services or learning services and so on. And the same for nonprofit. So you can create these autonomous units and you bundle them together on a project basis, for instance. So microenterprise, in my case, means that in Boundaryless, we are also dogfooding ourselves. We are shaping Boundaryless as a group of microenterprises. I'm leading the business model unit and microenterprise. So I'm basically more interested into designing business models and designing the externalities of an organization, of this micro unit. My other business partner, Emanuele, is focusing on how help organization to understand how to unbundle and become a platform organization. So understanding what microenterprises you should create, what other infrastructures, autonomous entities called SSP, shared service platform, are needed, because you also are providing some basic services that are used by all the other microenterprises, and you are shaping your organization as a platform. So with enabling services, empowering services, value exchange channels, and the brand, of course, that is coordinating everything and is the is capitalizing the value proposition and the branding of the entire group. And everything else is dynamic.
Beautiful. Coming towards the end of today's session, two questions. What gives you most hope looking at the state of affairs on this planet?
Okay, that's probably the hardest question, because I'm very realistic and pragmatic. Probably in some of my previous answers, the audience could detect some of things. I don't know. I'm not very optimistic. I'm trying to be pragmatic and realistic. So I'm perfectly aware by reading the IPCC reports and by reading, as I said, the limits to growth, that probably, I mean, we will have hard times ahead of us. But indeed, I mean, what else should we do rather than trying to put ourselves, head and body, into trying to do the best we can to improve something, whatever it is. Now, it could be a very small thing, it could be a great thing. Of course, everyone can do something according to her capabilities and her capacities and her traction, her branding. So something that turns me happy is that today I see a lot of very good initiatives that are trying to address the regeneration the right way. Of course, it's plenty of greenwashing, it's plenty of activities that probably they started with a positive approach, but then now we see that we know that they are not the right solution anymore. So I'm thinking, for instance, to reforestation. No, it's a great idea, and of course, I'm not blaming anyone who is working on the reforestation. Probably it's much better to have 1,000 more trees than not having them, but it's not solving only this. It is not solving this, the situation. It's not changing it for good. We need to do something else. Unfortunately, and this is my realistic part, if we don't do this at global level and at the same time all together, probably we can't change the situation that much to a positive extent. And we know how hard it is to do this at global level. So previously you mentioned AI. AI is a totally different topic, but with the same problems. If you don't regulate AI at global level, basically you're not regulating it. The same here. But indeed, there are some interesting initiatives. First of all, I believe that if you can get into the smallest and smallest units, the smallest people, individuals, and we can put them in condition to do something and to find channels where they can start doing something to change the reality, that's great. We should do that. And there are a lot of initiatives today that are acting in the regenerative world as if they are venture capital investors. And this is great. So I'm mentioning explicitly Regen Network or R3O, R3.0. They are doing something great because they are providing infrastructure, cultural elements, money for all the game changers they want to put their faces on some changing activities. And this is great because this, together with, so giving access to education, to methodologies, to knowledge, to money, and of course applying platform thinking, that's probably changing a lot of things because we need to get to the individuals. What else? Well, I also like maybe donut economics. So it's also good that now the world is reflecting on what we should consider in terms of growth, if not profit. And this is great. Then I don't know if donut economics would be the final answer. Probably it's something evolutionary. We are also here together to contribute to this awareness and to this common definition, but that's probably something really fascinating today. So I see a lot of attention from Fridays for Future. Also, people start conversating about climate change while at the bar. So it's something that is going mainstream, probably a little later than needed, than what was needed for addressing this for year. But now we are talking about that, and it's a very good moment.
Since we're meeting both as entrepreneurs, my last question for today: why do you think regenerative business models are a lever for the great transition we're all in together to manifest a planetary civilization? And I really don't mean it in a poetic sense, right? I mean, most of the problems need to start at a micro level, from micro enterprise to local to bioregional to national to transnational to global. And since we're meeting as entrepreneurs, specifically, obviously tying that to platform design, why do you think regenerative business models, could really be a lever?
Well, let me also challenge you. Of course, I'm joking, no? But the same definition of regenerative is probably wrong, in the sense that regeneration means generating something back again or repairing something that has been broken. Okay, but we all know from the history of the Earth that basically the Mother Earth doesn't need us, so we are just here temporarily. So a lot of other beings, no, have existed in the past, and then there have been some extinctions moments and so on. So basically, the Earth doesn't need us to regenerate anything. She will probably go ahead and so on. So, I mean, this is probably a very basic concept that everyone in the so advanced audience that you have is very well aware of. So for me, regeneration means, and this is why it's the only way, and this is the way, just to quote some of the famous TV shows now that everyone was nerdy guys. It's the only way, because now we all know that resources are limited. And so why should we continue doing something knowing that we are basically setting fire in the same house we are living into? So it's like, of course, we are killing ourselves slowly, rapidly, we don't know, but we all know that if we don't change something, we are just accelerating this process. We don't know if you can stop this process. This is another important perspective. So I don't know if the audience is familiar with deep adaptation things and Jan Bender theories, but there are a lot of theories about the doom optimism, no? But indeed, what else should we do if not trying to preserve our in being humans in the future? So if you are capable of understanding the implicit limitation, the implicit liabilities, the footprint, the impact we are having with our activities, we should change that, because it's also a matter of egoism and selfishness. Okay, and probably this is my less poetic view, is one of the key drivers, because I mean, if you can't convince anyone to do something for good and for someone else or for general principles, let's try at least to push a lot on the selfishness of individuals and try to clearly say that if you don't do that, you are basically damaging yourself, you're killing yourself. Maybe this plus, I mean, of course, I don't believe that people are all selfish and there's no spiritualism and there's no willingness to work as a network of individuals. So the human being is a social animal. So I also believe that we can double click on that motivator. But I mean, let's try to do everything together and try to see what happens, what's working.
Thanks, Luca, for this beautiful conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.